some familiar faces are getting some promotions at the University of Alabama.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. Thanks for making this your first listen every single day. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. So, speaking of fans, we're both fans of Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie. I'm old enough to remember when they were being recruited, frankly. So they are now
Gillespie was a running back at Florida? Is that right?
Gillespie was a running back at Florida from Mississippi.
Yeah, okay. And, I remember that.
Yeah. So
Roach we certainly remember.
Yeah, from the state of Alabama. So both of them are getting promotions. Kind of, look, yes, it's promotions. I want you to try and clarify what these promotions mean, because it's almost like it's a way to give you a bump up in money. I mean, I know the title's there too, but it's sort of like Dwight Schrute was assistant to the regional manager instead of assistant regional manager. DeBoer announced Wednesday that Freddie Roach will serve as associate head coach, and Robert Gillespie will and Roach will also continue to coach defensive line. Gillespie will remain as running backs coach, and he will have the title of assistant head coach. So, associate head coach, assistant head coach. Yeah. I think these are just titles that give them more money. I mean, maybe there's more power involved, but you fill me in.
Yeah, I think that's largely, exactly correct. Now, they may be given, both Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie may be given more duties in terms of taking stuff off the head coach's plate. I think there is an enormous amount of administrative things that the head coach is required to do or can do, and the best head coaches know what to delegate. Saban wasn't much of a delegator. Saban was very hands-on, or as hands-on as he could possibly be with the limited hours in the day. DeBoer seems to me to be a little bit more of a delegator, which is a traditional way to do things, by the way. Saban was sort of a cyborg, but DeBoer's going to delegate. So there could be some here's one silly example. Sometimes the head coach is a voter in the top 25. You vote in the coaches poll. That's something that's sometimes delegated. And while that's not a particularly time-consuming thing, that could be something that's delegated to the associate head coach. Sometimes it's delegated even down to the support staff. But I'm just using that as an example of there's a lot that the head coach is required to do that sometimes they pass off. But the main motivation to these titles, like Luke said, is about money. And some people say, well, why are you giving the title? Just give them more money if it's about the money. Well, one thing is Alabama has a very unique place in all of college football that we have to remember sometimes when we're not only the biggest kid on the block, we're the richest kid on the block. And Alabama cannot simply set salaries that everyone else has to follow. If the defensive line coach is making over $1 million, then what's the defensive line coach at Georgia going to want? At Tennessee, at Florida, at LSU, at USC, at Ohio State, Texas, North Carolina, Virginia. Every Power 5 program is going to say, look, Alabama's defensive line coach makes $1.3 million. You got me making $450,000. So Alabama has to be cognizant of what they're paying so as not to basically break the backs of everyone in college football. And I know that,
it's not just break the backs. It's not just break the backs of everybody else. It's also, I would say, sets a bad precedence for us personally,
yes,
or universally, where if we say, okay, you know what, you say, okay, just give them more money because the title really is irrelevant. Okay, well, let's just say we give Freddie Roach $300,000 more. I don't know what the number is. It hadn't been approved by the Board of Trustees yet. But so let's say it's $300,000 more. The next defensive line coach is going to go, I want what Freddie Roach was making.
That's exactly right.
If you say, hey, but Freddie Roach was also associate head coach, and you're not that. Then he can go, wait a minute, what is that? That's for me to know and for you to find out when you become associate head coach.
That's exactly right. It's about setting the market, right? Alabama can't set the market for everyone else just because Alabama's capable of paying a higher salary. It has to be earned. And no doubt Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie have earned these titles and more money. And not just for the job they do in terms of recruiting and coaching, which are both outstanding. But the fact of the matter is Roach and Gillespie were a big part of the transition and keeping the roster largely intact, keeping the recruiting class largely intact. Freddie Roach was not recruiting Ron Williams, but it's our understanding at BOL that when the old staff left and T-Rob, who was recruiting Ron Williams, when they left and T-Rob went to Georgia and we didn't have a new coaching staff in place, who picked up the ball and ran with it with Ryan? Freddie Roach. I mean, and that's typical of what Freddie does for the program. Gillespie's guys at running back. I mean, is there any other position on the team, Luke, that is recruited better and coached better than running back in terms of we always have highly recruited backs. They're always good players. And Robert Gillespie is just the latest really good Alabama running back coach that deserves a lot of pay and a great title to go along with it. So really it is about recognizing what they've done and what they mean to the program. And giving them a lot more money. But at the same time, you can't just pay the running back coach and the defensive line coach all that money because, as Luke said, sets the precedent for the next guy that shows up here at Alabama. But it's also setting the market for the country and have to be responsible. What do they say in Spider-Man? The famous line from Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility. And that's really what Alabama has in college football is a lot of responsibility too. So that's why you come up with these titles and pay these coaches. So Alabama's not necessarily resetting the market in college football. I'll give you a good example. What happens when Texas decides we're going to pay Sark $20 million to be the head coach? Well, DeBoer, Brian Kelly, Dabo, I mean, you name them, they're all going to be like, I'm only making 9 and Sark's making 20. I mean, that's what you call setting the market. And in Texas, which has more money than anyone not named Elon Musk, that's why Texas also has to be careful with what they pay.
But it's not just altruism. I mean, they're doing it because they're like, we don't want to get ourselves in a pickle too. So
and they'll be the top of the market. They're proud to be at the top of the market, just like Alabama's proud to be at the top. But you can't
overpay when you don't have
industry on its head.
But it's the same thing with Freddie Roach. I mean, I know there's some people when you heard the story you just told. Some people are like, man, Freddie Roach, he's got so much Bama in him. Little did we know he was bucking for that associate head coach job. And going back to great power comes great responsibility. I've told this before that my ex-wife and I were talking when we were still married, and we were talking about, I think, one of my kids. And she said, Truett, it's like that saying from George Washington, with great power comes great responsibility. And I remember I was in the car riding with her and my young son, who was like 5 at the time. And we're riding down the road and I go, it took me about a mile and a half, but I go, that was Peter Parker's Uncle Ben. That wasn't, Peter Parker didn't even say it. No, George Washington didn't say it. And Spider-Man didn't even say it. It was Spider-Man's uncle who said
Spider-Man's
it.
Uncle.
And I was like, don't go around quoting. George Washington's already got to deal with this whole made-up story about a cherry tree. Don't make him out to be, even more of a phony. Anyway.
How crazy is it that as a society we know things like Peter Parker's uncle's name?
I know.
But it's crazy.
If you ask me who
we know things like that.
If you ask me who the Secretary of State is, I'm going to pass. So
exactly.
Anyway.
But who's Spider-Man? Who's Superman? The son of Jor-El?
Jor-El. Yeah.
Who's Jor-El?
Or the Kents, dad? The Kents who adopted him when he landed in a – I don't think they went through the proper procedure because he landed in a rock on Earth And then he picked up their truck with one hand, and they were like, you know what? This seems like we should just adopt him. We don't need to turn this into anybody. Anyway,
Didn't
all right.
Superman's, how do I know this? Superman's mother and Batman's mother have the same, Superman's stepmother and Batman's mother have the same name?
Well, it'd be not, I don't know about stepmother because she didn't marry Jor-El. In the movie, they did. I don't know if in the comics they do, because there were some comics aficionados who were like, they don't have the same name. Maybe they do, and I never looked it up, but I remember there was some controversy about that in the Superman v Batman Dawn of Justice. They did, and some people complained about that. I don't know if they actually did, but look, Jimmy, we got to talk about FanDuel.
Oh, and by the way, my PA tells me that Winston. Well,
go ahead, say again.
No, my PA has just shown me evidence that Winston Churchill also said something highly similar to what Uncle Ben said, and the creator of Spider-Man, Stan Lee, wrote about the great power comes great responsibility. But Winston Churchill said something similar. Now, I'm not sure what predates what. Maybe Winston Churchill, who's super good with quotes, maybe he stole most of it from Marvel Comics.
Maybe, and he did it in a drunken stupor, I can tell you that. But FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, or live same-game parlays, or exclusive props, or player props, or game props, or all kind of props, and much, much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official partner of the NBA. Yeah, I really could do like I could do a 5-minute podcast weekly on comic books, because I just love comic book stuff. But and I'm getting out of it though. There are too many characters. There are too many. I want the core characters. Don't give me any more, the Marvels or Madam Web, which apparently is like the worst movie that's ever been created.
Panned. That's getting panned. Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, it's got Sydney Sweeney in it, so I'm going to see it, but doesn't mean I'm going to like it.
Yeah, I saw our last movie. It was pretty good, but the 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. Oof.
Yeah, and they like
that's bad.
That's like, for the SAT, you get 400 points for putting your name down. You get 20% for just being at Rotten Tomatoes. 17% is pretty bad.
My guy Hastings at BOL is a huge comic book movie guy. He goes to all those superhero movies. He loves them, the superhero movies. Even Hastings is like, this movie is terrible. He was there opening night, of course.
Well, Jimmy, you put up a good article about defensive line recruiting.
Thanks.
And not even so much about who we're recruiting for next year, but I think one of the main complaints about this roster is, where are all our good defensive linemen? Now, maybe they haven't performed as well as some of the ones in the past, like an Ashawn Robinson, a Deron Payne, a Jonathan Allen, guys, Q, maybe they hadn't performed as well as those guys, right? Gotcha. But recruiting ranking wise, these guys are pretty highly touted. And as you said, name 5 teams, 10 teams that have a better defensive line rotation than we do.
Yeah, you can't. And I was surprised myself. I mean, I knew it would be up there, but until you do the work, and that's what I did. I went back and looked at the On3 industry rankings. We have 14 defensive linemen on scholarship this fall, 14. And keep in mind, that's for 3 positions now, nose guard, defensive tackle, and the new bandit spot. There's really 14 defensive linemen. And I'm not talking about edge outside linebacker guys. I'm talking about big-bodied dudes. 14. 8 of those 14 were national top 100 players. And really, they were all in the top 77. I mean, if I remember right, because I'm not looking at it. But 8 of the 14 were national top 100. 3 of the remaining 6 were national top 250, which means 4-star blue chip prospects, as far as I'm concerned. If you're national top 250, you're a blue chipper to me. That means only 3 lightly recruited guys are in that defensive line group. And of those 3, by the way, of the lightly recruited guys, one of them's Tim Keenan, who's happened
who's had a
to
good
develop into one of the best. Yeah, he's one of the best nose guards in all of college football, frankly. So in terms of Alabama's recruiting, now we'll talk about development in a minute, but in terms of what they're recruiting to campus, you cannot find, in terms of doing exactly what I did, line up everybody based on their recruiting rankings. I mean, Georgia can compete with that. Probably Ohio State can. And you might be able to find 2 or 3 others that can match it or be close, like Michigan, Texas, maybe LSU, maybe. But you're just not going to find 8 national top 100 defensive line guys in one room and 11 of 14 being national top 250. So for all this talk about Alabama doesn't recruit well, the people that are saying that are comparing Alabama to what they were in 2016 or what they were in 2011 or 2012. And while they're making a good point in a way, it's also an irrelevant point because Alabama doesn't have to play those teams. Alabama has to play other 2024 teams and how they've recruited, not how previous Alabama teams did. So I think a lot of the complaining about defensive line recruiting is just wrong. It's just factually incorrect. Now we can talk about development. That's a different subject and topic, and we can talk about that right now or in another show. And I'm sure I'll make a post about that soon.
Yeah, I think that what we're saying is there's probably more reason for optimism about this defensive line room right now versus what your expectation are. I mean, I get your expectations are insanely high because again, I ran off a bunch of dudes. You know, when you talk about Marcel Darius and you talk about Deron Payne and you talk about Jonathan Allen or Ashawn, any of those dudes. I mean, yeah, we haven't really had any of those dudes. Now, Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong. My memory's shot. I hadn't taken my Prevagen today, but tell me, like, has defensive line been as good when it comes to quality over the last 2 or 3 years in the recruiting cycles? I mean, name outside Georgia's had some dominant defensive linemen, but I can't name a ton more. JT Tuamalu, I think at Ohio State was a thing, but he's sort of
good.
He's done a little bit of a backslide.
He's not going to be like the number 1 player taken in the draft, and like he was the number 1 player coming out of high school.
Who are the big time? Maybe the defensive line crop overall isn't. Maybe the quality isn't as good as it was, say, 10 years ago. You know, these things do come in waves and cycles. Yeah, you know, you'll have
right about that.
Yeah.
No, you're right about that. It is cyclical. I mean, in terms of the amount of defense, let's just think about this. Some of it is just normal human physiology and biology, right? In terms of what is out there to recruit, there are fewer 300-pound linemen that are fantastic athletes than anything else, right? I mean, when you think about football, defensive backs, running backs, wide receivers, those are exceptional athletes, but a lot of humans are that size. I mean, I'm not. Luke's as big as a lot of football players, you know, naturally. But what I'm saying is defensive backs, running backs, wide receivers, those are largely normal-sized humans or average humans. What football players are built so fewer than the general population? And obviously offensive line is way up there because there's not a lot of 300-pound plus people walking around. But 300 pounds and a premium athlete, you're talking about rare people. And that's why there's just fewer defensive linemen than anywhere else. And it sort of comes in cycles. And it's why, other than quarterback, elite defensive linemen are the gold in recruiting because good luck finding 310-pound high school players that run well. It's just very difficult to find. There's so few of those guys. And as Luke is pointing out, some cycles, it's fewer than other cycles. And this upcoming cycle, the 25 class that we're starting to piece together now, that's going to be, you know, high school players who are seniors this fall. The 25 class, it does not look very deep at the defensive line position and doesn't appear to be very deep in the state of Alabama either, although it does look like it's a good year overall in Alabama. But boy, that defensive line, it's just hard to find those guys, period.
This is so wrong of me to what I'm about to say. But last night I went
the
out
end
to
of the
eat.
show. It's coming.
It's not the end of the show. We got another segment. But this is so wrong what I'm about to say. But last night I went out to dinner with my wife and daughter, and I saw two pretty unattractive, huge people, like male and a female, both of them just not attractive people. I mean, I know I'm one to talk. That's why I can judge them. I'm not attractive, and I know unattractive when I see it. And they had a small boy with them, and my first thought was, man, I hope we're sending him some letters.
That is wrong.
I was like, that's pretty awful. Like, I could have, like, the old me would have been like, whoa, those are some unattractive people. The new me is like, man, that kid's going to be a defensive lineman. That cycle's going to be good. We need to be thinking ahead. Kalen DeBoer Jr. needs to be thinking of that one.
It is crazy when you think about how big some of these kids are at a young age. Others grow late. I mean, there's a different story behind all of them, but like I believe Jaheim Otis in particular was really huge in the 6th and 7th grade. I've heard stories about how big he was, but other guys grow late. I mean, Jonathan Allen was really a linebacker in high school, and we sort of recruited him to play jack linebacker to an extent. Of course, he's a 290-pound plus, defensive lineman in the NFL, but it is a difficult position to recruit because there's so few of them. Hey, NIL has made things worse. When I said quarterback and defensive tackle are the gold of recruiting, that is reflected in NIL money, I'm afraid, in terms of why it's becoming increasingly difficult to sign these defensive linemen, because they are in demand, and in demand means that they can be pricey in the NIL space. And that's going to affect Alabama's ability to stockpile like they have in the past, just simply because of the reality of NIL.
All right, Jim, when we come back, big weekend in Tuscaloosa. You know what? And it's a big weekend in Tuscaloosa for sure, because Alabama basketball is going to be playing, but they got a lot of stuff playing. And if you needed tickets to any of that stuff, do like me. Go ahead and get your tickets from Gametime. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. You can go download the app. I've already gotten my Alabama, Texas A&M tickets through Gametime, and I love this place. I'm telling you, this app is fantastic. It's so easy. Even a Luke could use it. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. All in prices. They show your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. I knew I was getting a great deal before I checked out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event. I promise you, I bought my tickets on Gametime today for the Texas A&M basketball game, and you can buy them even an hour after the event starts. So if you're like, hey, this game's getting good, or Alabama's blowing them out, I want to go check it out, I'm right here in Tuscaloosa, you can get it with Gametime. Look, and the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So you still get to go to the game, right? You get 110% of your money back if you find something, which you won't. So that's why they can guarantee it. So that's the cool thing. Look, go to Gametime and download that app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So big weekend in Tuscaloosa. I just mentioned the Alabama Texas A&M basketball game. It's even bigger now because I think Texas A&M, they got a little bit hosed, if you ask me. I thought there was a travel at the end of that Vanderbilt game, but so be it. A&M loses. But Buzz Williams is the kind of coach who can lose at Vandy and then come win at Tuscaloosa. So you got to be very careful. Wade Taylor IV is a dude. They got some players. It's not going to be easy. It looks like it's going to be a pretty solid crowd. Because like I said, I bought my tickets on Gametime and the prices were the best, but they're still more than typical. So I think we're going to have a good crowd. We're going to have these retro jerseys. We're going to honor the Elite 8 team from 04. That's going to be a lot of fun. There's a softball game on Saturday and Sunday, I think. Alabama women play Auburn women in Tuscaloosa on Sunday in basketball, and men's baseball is going on. So ton to do in Tuscaloosa this weekend. It's going to be sort of a cold day, so just bundle up, head on down to T-Town, and make the magic happen.
Yeah, I just hate that the weather's not going to be perfect. Now, obviously, I don't think there's rain, but it is going to be cool all weekend, which could affect baseball, softball crowds to an extent. But what a great weekend on campus. We finally have the first weekend in 2024 when the basketball team is home, the baseball team having its home opener against Manhattan College. The softball team is hosting an invitational, and the softball will play 5 games in 3 days. Softball playing twice Friday, twice Saturday, and once on Sunday. Virginia, one of the teams coming to town. So Alabama facing some Power 5 competition in the Virginia Cavaliers. So softball off to a great start too. 5-0, ranked as high as 11th in the country in a couple of polls. And let me tell you, baseball hadn't played yet. This is the opener. I've gone to a few practices. This baseball team is really, really promising. It's going to, the league is just brutal, crazy brutal. So finishing 500 in the SEC is an achievement. People have to understand that because it's just a fact. But this team is capable of doing a great thing like that, finishing around 500 in the SEC, which not only puts you in the NCAA tournament, but you're probably hosting a regional if you finish 500 in the SEC. I think Alabama is that good. Based on what I've seen on the baseball field, I think they're going to have a good start to this weekend. Already read that Ben Hess is going to start Friday night, potential first-round pick, pitching for Alabama Friday in the opener. Riley Quick will start Saturday. Younger brother of former Alabama offensive lineman Pierce Quick. Riley's looking like he's a future pro himself. He's going to pitch on Saturday. Sunday a little up in the air, but man, deep pitching staff, and these guys have been murdering the ball in practice. So looking forward to baseball, softball, and of course, the Alabama Crimson Tide, SEC leading Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team.
Alone at the top right now because Auburn destroyed South Carolina as predicted. I mean, they beat them by 40. And look, playing in Neville Arena is difficult. As a lot of people have found out, but playing in Coleman Coliseum is also difficult. So here's the thing: the Texas A&M, if you ask me, Jimmy, is the second easiest game remaining on Alabama's schedule. Arkansas at home at the end, and that's even hard to count. Even though they got blown out again at home by Tennessee last night, Arkansas's got some players. They just can't get it working. Musselman has been tied to the Louisville job. Maybe that's affecting some things. They got some other locker room stuff, literally and figuratively. So who knows? But after that, tell me the easy wins. Florida at home, who's already gone to Kentucky and won. Florida on the road, who's just beat Auburn at home. Kentucky on the road, because it's Kentucky on the road. I know they've not been Kentucky as we know Kentucky. Tennessee at home, at Ole Miss. Tell me the easy wins in there.
There's not. And this is, I'm already getting upset about this before it happens, because I just know if Alabama loses some of those games and doesn't win the SEC, I'm going to read or hear things that say, we had it and we choked.
Yep.
No. It's the schedule. It's the schedule. And if we had played these games early and played easy games late, we'd be talking about the incredible charge towards winning the SEC, right? But we're playing the really tough games late, and it's just the way the schedule fell. And unless we get just blown out and are non-competitive in all 5 of those games, and if that's the case, then I'll join in the crowd with, boy, we played really poorly and choked down the stretch. But I bet we don't. I bet we don't play poorly. But I also will be shocked if we somehow survive that 5-game stretch and win this league. I'll be surprised.
I'll say this. And another thing is just the luck of the draw. I would swap schedules with Auburn right now. They end up with 2 shots at Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky at home, and they got to travel to Tennessee, and Mississippi State at home. You can't get any easier in this league, just about.
Exactly. And the schedule is going to decide it between the main contenders, Alabama, Auburn, South Carolina, Tennessee, and to some extent Kentucky. The schedule is going to decide it down the stretch. And if you want to win the SEC, you're going to have to find a road win that no one is expecting. And I think but hey, Alabama's must wins, as Luke's already pointed out, the A&M home game and the Arkansas home game. You got to win those because
Gotta
you may
win
not
those.
win the because
And you
may not
gotta-
win the others.
I think you got to win Florida at home. Now,
Yeah.
you don't have to win Tennessee at home. I tell you what, if somebody said, Luke, here's what we'll do. We'll give you all the home games and the game at Ole Miss. Lord have mercy. Where do I sign up?
I would take that. Boy, I would bump Mother Teresa to the ground trying to get to that set of wins. I mean, I'm telling you, that would be great. But hey, one game at a time, and A&M is a very winnable game. But I'm with you. I'm excited to see Wade Taylor IV in person just because I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's one of the great players in this league, and we don't exactly defend too great inside or outside. So Wade Taylor's gonna be a handful for us, like he is for anybody.
So, all right, that's going to do it for today's pod. We'll probably be back tomorrow. We'll see. But until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.